Hello, everybody. Welcome to Everybody Matters, our family and friends edition. My name is Jill Catherine, and I'm the host of the chat. So welcome. Thank you for joining us. When you join and if you feel comfortable, please let us know that you're here. We'd love for you to engage with us and share with us and let us know how we can be of support to you. So this is our Everybody Matters Family and Friends edition. It allows us an opportunity to provide support, answer maybe some questions that you have, and also allow us to share more with you, provide you with some education and some information about this very difficult brain disease and an eating disorder. We know firsthand how difficult this disease is for family and friends. We know how seeing your loved ones suffer with this can be one of the most difficult experiences of your life. And we know the severity of this disease and the risk it puts your loved one at. So we aim with our, virtual support group to provide a space for you to be able to really get some education and some support, because your role in your loved one's recovery is so critical and crucial, and it can really provide great support system for them, because the journey is a long one, and I say long, not necessarily, there isn't a time limit to it, but it is a change of life, and it takes a tremendous support system. And the healing of this disease can bring you much closer as a family and as a friend, and it can definitely create divides. And so taking the time to learn more about the disease, to reach out for help, to ask questions, to get support is so critical on your end, because I would imagine for your loved one, you want this recovery journey to help bring you all closer together. So how we do our chats with family and friends is I start and I just do some education through a topic, a theme. We do our chats once a month. They're the second Wednesday of every month at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So I start with some education and then open it up to questions that you have. And at any point as I start sharing about the education piece, if there's something that you want to add to that or comment on, please do. Please do. You don't need to wait. What we try to be mindful of is everybody's situation is different. And so if there's very specific questions to your loved one, it might be difficult to find the best solution in this chat, but I will do my best to support you, because that's why we're here. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. And what we're going to talk about today is the 9 truths about eating disorders. Last week, there was the first ever World Eating Disorder Day. There was over 200 organizations from countries all over the world that participated in this day. And it trended on Twitter. It was a really powerful day. And what it brought awareness to is that eating disorders are an international epidemic, that we're looking for the World Health Organization to take this disease seriously, because it's a world health issue. And so there's a great website called worldeatingdisordersday.org. And I just encourage you to take a look at it. There's some really great information on it. So one of the things I'm going to share from that day is they created, a collection of people created something called the 9 truths about eating disorders. And we really believe in the 9 truths that they formulated. Those of us who do this work, they're spot on. So I'm going to share with you these 9 truths. And like I said, at any point, if you want to comment or ask a question about the truth, Please do, okay? So the first truth is many people, truth number one, many people with eating disorders look healthy, but may be extremely ill. So I think this is one of the most common mistakes about eating disorders, and it can actually be the most dangerous one. We, just like in our world of body image, we believe a healthy body should look a certain way, or a beautiful body, or sexy body, or whatever that may be. In the truth of eating disorders, we think eating disorders look a certain way. There is no look to an eating disorder. Yes, there are definitely bodies that you have seen associated with this disease that look anorexic, but that's not always what the body can look like. You can have individuals who unfortunately are struggling with this disease, and even with anorexia of that disease, and not be just a skeleton body, but could be perceived as a healthy body, or it could be categorized as a maybe overweight body. So there is no physical body that eating disorders necessarily always look like. And the other reason why this is so important, this first truth, that that many people with eating disorders look healthy yet may be extremely ill, is because, unfortunately, because of that truth, sometimes people who look healthy or extremely ill don't get the help they need. And there's this thing that, we say that, why do we have to, people need to get sicker? We let them get sicker before they get better. Because we're lost. We don't know that truth, that someone can be very, very sick, but maybe looking healthy. So it's a very dangerous thing to make an assumption on one's severity of the disease. So let's go to truth number two. Families are not to blame, and can be patient, and can be the patient's and provider's best allies in treatment. This is a really important one, particularly for our call here, but just in general, that families aren't to blame, and they can be the best allies in support of your loved one and for the providers who are doing the treatment. So what's really important about that is families aren't to blame. Family dynamics can certainly play a role in the overall picture of your loved one who's struggling. It can activate certain parts of their personality that have, or the genetics that have led to this disease. So families aren't to blame, but we don't want to turn a blind eye to what the dynamic is in our home. And it's really important to open both of our eyes to what that dynamic is, as a way of understanding how this big puzzle is coming together of this disease and how your loved one is being affected. So seeing the big picture of your family dynamic and where your loved one fits in that dynamic, and maybe the sensitivities that they have and how that dynamic affects them, isn't about the blame, but it is about being aware. So it's really important in these 9 truths that a truth was created around blame, because I know parents can feel a tremendous amount of blame at times. And we need parents and loved ones supporting this recovery process as fierce and as honest and authentic to help your loved one. That is one of the most critical recovery factors, is having a really solid family support system who is working to understand the disease, be an ally in it. And so as soon as you can relieve yourself of that blame, then as a family member, you can more honestly and compassionately just take a look at what your family dynamics are. And that can help really give insight into what your loved one is experiencing and get to understand more about them. So truth number 3, an eating disorder diagnosis is a health crisis that disrupts personal and family functioning. So that word of it's a health crisis, I think is really what we want to hone in on, because some of the other truths, we'll get to this, but oftentimes we don't necessarily see or know that it's a crisis because your loved one might be functional. They might be seeming okay. But if we go back to the first one, that a healthy person who looks potentially healthy, however you define that, could actually be very ill. And so there is this critical factor of their health, because we have lived and experienced thousands of stories of people who didn't understand the crisis and it was too late. So the other part of that, how it disrupts the family and how it disrupts family functioning and personal functioning. When we understand the brain disease aspect of the eating disorder, it helps us to understand more of how it affects the personal functioning. One of the truths gets to this of how it's not, just a fad. That when we underfeed our bodies, we starve our brains. And there's much more neuroscience these days in the field of eating disorders. Dr. Laura Hill is a phenomenal treatment. She provides treatment. And there's a great TED Talk she does about this, is what's happening neurologically, that now with the science and technology we have today, those who have struggled and say, there's this voice in my head, now we can actually, science has shown the truth of what that voice is, that's real. And so we've learned through, when the starving of the brain, of the body happens, it starves the brain, and there's a rewiring in, our neurological capacity, our brain functioning changes. And so there's a reason why your loved ones seemed a certain way and now they seem different. They don't seem like the same person. Their personality has changed. There's a neurological component to that is very real. So this disease affecting their personal functioning isn't a willpower or always a choice. There is a neurological component that is playing a critical role in that. And once the body is starting to be refed, the brain starts to be refed, and that can be rewired. I'll share just a personal anecdote with you. So 20 years ago, when I was a freshman in college, I got sick with an eating disorder. And literally, I remember I had decided to go on a diet, and I was 3 weeks on the diet. And then one day I woke up with this voice in my head that I'd never had before. Now, I always had thoughts in my head that were negative, about my body, I wasn't thin enough, that if I had the perfect body, So I had body image thoughts, but I never had this voice in my head that I had one day after 3 weeks of dieting, and I woke up. And that voice was obsessive, and it just did not, 24 hours a day, it just stopped. It would run and run about food and calories and weight and numbers and exercise, and just go and go and go and go and go. I never had that voice in my head before. And as women are highly sensitive to serotonin, and, Carolyn Hodges of the Upstate New York Eating Disorder Service, the CEO there, we present together a lot, and she'll often say in her presentations that you can take 100 women and put them on a diet. 30 out of those women will end up with an eating disorder because they're sensitive to the serotonin levels in their brain, and they're predisposed. So, I literally I'm one of those people that I was on a diet for 33 weeks, And so so that voice was very real. And then the last part of this little anecdote is, so I was blessed. Got treatment through Carolyn's program, and this was 20 years ago. And I was able to refeed over time my body and my brain, and then work through recovery and then healing, and, you know, now be able to, you know, help others through this process. But what I share in this is that literally how different my brain is, that for, you know, those next 3 years in college, when I was still really in and out of the symptoms and still really struggling with the brain disease, I don't remember much of those years. I actually saw Carolyn for 1.5 years pretty consistently, and I can't tell you today what any of those sessions were. I don't remember. My brain is so different now, right? Because I was in a different mind. So I don't even remember. And it's not that I don't remember because it was 20 years ago. It was just, even 10 years ago, I didn't remember, you know, because your brain is in such a different place. So it's really important to know that about your loved one, because you're going to feel it's so much frustration at times for what they're doing, that if you can just know in your heart about the brain aspect, I think it can just help give you a little bit more space, some compassion, and more curiosity to keep trying to find solutions working with your loved one's treatment team. You know, staying focused on the recovery, and that it's a process. So let's move on to our next truth. Truth number 4, eating disorders are choices, eating disorders are not choices, but serious biologically influenced illnesses. And I think this is, you know, a big myth, is that they are choices. You know, I made the choice to go on a diet. Many people do that, make a choice to try and lose weight, or not even they're making a choice, and maybe just making a choice not to eat because they're feeling a lot of emotion and they just don't feel good, right? We can start to make those choices, but when the disease of an eating disorder, you don't choose it. It is a response. It is a medical condition. It is an illness that happens within your brain, your body. And there are biological components to it, right? And, you know, going back to the example that I share that, you know, Carolyn would speak of, you could take 100 women and put them on a diet, 30 are going to end up with an eating disorder, you know, because there's these different biological components. So they're not choices. You know, that's a really important thing. When, as parents, you know, it's my experience, my parents who were doing their best and trying to understand, but they would get very frustrated. Why can't you stop? You know, why are you continuing to do this? And not really understanding how that brain disease component takes a role, and how crucial it is to have treatment about a nutritional, psychological, medical doctor, and for them to have support groups too, or community. So let's go to truth number 5. Eating disorders affect people of all genders, ages, races, ethnicities, body shapes and weights, sexual orientations, and socioeconomic statuses. The easiest way to say this is that eating disorders are inclusive. They don't exclude any group of people. And it's been really important for us to make that truth, because historically it's been, eating disorders have been known or seen in the mass media as a very privileged, upper class, you know, white woman's disease. And that is not all the truth of the disease of an eating disorder. It affects everybody. I mean, there's people in their 60s and 70s who are struggling with eating disorders. There are people, like we said, they're all body shapes and sizes who are struggling with this disease that you can't necessarily see. in all cultures and ethnicities. I mean, World Eating Disorder Day was a perfect example of that. You know, we have, you know, advocacy help, you know, happening in different parts of the Middle East. You have advocacy happening in different parts of Africa, of Nigeria, you know, getting people getting treatment there and coming to the United States. I mean, there's so many stories around the world. So this isn't what we've come to understand through various media forms, that it's a, you know, white girl's disease. So let's go to truth number 6. Eating disorders can carry an increased risk for both suicide and medical complications. So eating disorders carry an increased risk for suicide and medical complications. And this is a really scary truth. And I think this is one of the scariest of the truth, is the suicidal risk that comes with this and the medical complications. You know, and I'm living proof that I had, you know, a year and a half into my disease, I had suicide attempts. And looking back on it now, I really was having a bad reaction to antidepressant I was on that, you know, was actually increased my risk. And I, by the grace of whatever power exists in the world, I survived it. But my story isn't unique, unfortunately. I mean, there's so much shame and that comes with this disease that your loved one is going through. And I think what's an important anecdote that I'll share about that for me, for you all, is, you know, so my parents were trying to be allies. They were connecting me to treatment. I was expressed that I needed to go inpatient, that I felt at risk, that I felt a harm to myself. And they, even though they still weren't understanding the severity, they said, okay. And they were trying to get me into treatment. And it can take a little time, you know, to figure out what facility to send your loved one to, or your insurance, and what's going to be covered, what's not going to be covered. So when I asked for the help, 24 hours passed, 48 hours passed, 72 hours passed. And by that third day, you know, I was at such an unstable and unhealthy place. It was when I just felt that I wasn't getting the help I needed. And, you know, anyone who's in this disease isn't thinking rationally, right? So I share that because even when we're helping our loved one, and, you know, we're just dealing with the time it takes in life and to go through all these things, the person who's suffering isn't really understanding that, and they're in crisis. And they might not be able to say that exactly they're in crisis, because I think they've said, I need help, so that's enough, right? So it's really understanding as a family member and as loved one that risk is there. And so when your loved one is at that place that they're able to say, I need help, it's probably pretty intense. And even if it takes time to get them help, there needs to be some sort of immediate daily checking in with your loved one and safety net, so they're feeling like they're safe until those days can get them where they need to go. And that's if your loved one's even able to articulate the risks that they're at. So knowing just broadly that there's the risk that exists and the medical complications. I mean, I have, you know, a close colleague today who, you know, years since the behaviors of the eating disorder and still has medical problems in her body as a result of the years of behavior. So the sooner you can get your loved one connected to treatment, and not just connected to treatment at the beginning, but keeping them connected. So is if that's, you know, being connected to the Upstate New York Eating Disorder Service through the nutrition clinic, through Soulstone, through a therapist, through a medical doctor, that treatment team needs to be in place, not just for today, but for a continued period of time. Because it's that journey of the brain and the body, the refeeding, what has to restabilize, then the deeper psychological and therapeutic work that needs to happen to help heal your loved one inside to come through this. So we don't really want to, you don't want to take a part of that support system out just because it looks like it. And I understand there's costs involved. It is a very difficult thing, but as best as you can, keep those support systems in place is really critical. So let's go to truth number 7. Genes and environment play important roles in the development of eating disorders. So our genes, right, we kind of talked about this, the biological effect, and, you know, genes and environment. So family dynamics, other dynamics, maybe in social settings and athletic settings, in other ways that your loved one might be feeling pressure to perform and achieve and succeed and to live up to certain expectations and standards. I mean, those all play a role. Beauty standards, athletic standards, performance standards, academic standards. I mean, you know, we live in a society that has these certain standards, and there's different ways you can look at that, but that certainly can play a role in environmentally, whatever your loved one is involved with. I was in athletics, you know, my athletic environment was the best thing. I love sports. It helped build my character. And yet there was part of that environment that absolutely played a role in this. So it just played a role in it. You know, there was I had a number of coaches who really believed that athletic body had to look a certain way. They focused on that athletic ideal, you know, much like dancers experience that a dancer's body has to look a certain way. So there's certain, or gymnasts or whatever it may be, there's certain environments that there's an ideal that can play an influence, right? And this isn't about blaming, it's understanding the whole picture of your loved one's experience and putting the pieces together, right? It's really about putting the pieces together and then understanding their genetic factors. You know, certain individuals are highly sensitive, who are deep feelers, who are pleasers, who, you know, different parts of their personalities, right, that are susceptible to this disease. And then genetically, they have identified genetic links, you know, and I look back at my genes, you know, I have a long family history of families members who have really struggled with weight and body and using food as a way to, you know, comfort and not comfort. And so there was a lot of disordered eating happening in my genetic makeup too. So things to just look at, the whole puzzle, remember. Okay, so let's move next. Truth number 8. Genes alone do not predict who will develop eating disorders. You know, so these truths might start to feel contradictory, but they're not. They're just going back to looking at the big puzzle here. So truth number 7 was genes can be a component. Truth number 8 is, but it doesn't mean it's going to predict that someone's going to have this disease, because there's other factors involved, right? It's in some ways, you know, Carolyn will often say there's a perfect storm. There is a intersection of different aspects of this person's life that comes all at once. And then there's the onset of the disease. So these truths are really there to give you this big picture. So the last truth number 9, full recovery from an eating disorder is possible. Early detection and intervention are important. And I would say early detection or just intervention is not just important, it's critical. I mean, it is absolutely critical. I mean, as soon as you can detect it and get your loved one support, getting them connected to a treatment team is the best thing you could do for their long-term recovery. But this last truth, I think, is so important for you all watching this and knowing that full recovery is absolutely possible. I mean, I'm a living proof of it, and there's many more like me who are out there. But, you know, I have to say I was blessed. I was I was a few months into my disorder, and I was starting to get treatment. So I was really blessed in that way. But regardless, whenever you can intervene and get your loved one treatment, it's so critical. And I don't know how I would have ever recovered without treatment. You know, you can't, someone who's sick within themselves, within their brain, you can't expect them to find their own wellness. You know, you can't. You need outside influences to help them along the process. And there's the aspects of the mental illness that just can't really be understood, you know, when you're in the illness. So it's really important to have that treatment team. But recovery is certainly possible. And the truth is, you know, I remember Carolyn saying to my mom that telling her this takes some years. It's a long haul. There's not a short-term fix. And I remember that just, you know, really just devastating my mom, just thinking that years and oh my goodness. But here's I'm going to give you the truth. Here's the beauty in this. Then if you are in this to support your loved one to heal, there is great healing that can not only come to your loved one, but to you and your family. And healing in a way that provides some freedom that is very difficult to find in our culture. You know, when we're able, part of this healing and recovery process is really getting in touch with one's true self, one's own voice. Your loved one to really have to understand who they are, what they believe, not what you might believe or what your partner might believe or what, you know, your friends might believe, or, you know, your loved one is gonna really have to figure out what they believe and what they want out of life and how they define health and success and beauty and power and love and all these things, the meaning of life. You know, we have a tremendous emphasis in our culture around image, an image of everything, not just body, but of happiness and success and what it all looks like. You know, this disease requires you to have to really ask oneself very deep questions that maybe you might haven't asked yourself, but your loved one is going to have to ask themselves these questions. They have to create a new belief system that works for them. And that new belief system that they're going to need to have to find within themselves that is true for them, it might conflict with your belief system. And there's an opportunity there. You know, there's an opportunity to grow together, to learn together, to have compassion and tolerance for each person's individuality and differences and uniquenesses. Or there's an opportunity to divide and separate. You know, if your loved one's belief system isn't the one that you want them to have, you know, it can be very difficult. But they are going to need to find their own path and find their own self that is coming from a place of worth and of value and of love. That is part of the healing journey from the eating disorder. And it can give them the greatest gift because, you know, many people today, we have, you know, millions of people who are very confused about their bodies, who are struggling, who are going on diet after diet, who think their life would be happier 10 pounds from now, that believe, you know, weight is a measurement of health, who believe they're never thin enough, that they have to look a certain way to feel beautiful. I mean, we have a whole, you know, billion-dollar diet industry that permeates this culture, and it is what it is, you know. So what happens with the eating disorder healing is that you start to find freedom from all of that and a sense of peace of who you are in this body. And it's a freedom that millions of people never really find because they don't really have to. They can sort of live on that surface and, you know, feel shame and kind of bounce around in it. But when you struggle with the brain disease of the eating disorder and you have to have a different relationship to food, you know, if you think about, you know, people who struggle with substance abuse, they don't have to have those substances to live and eat and or live to survive. Food you have to. So if that is the substance that has become your drug in a way, however you use it or don't use it, you have to really go in a much deeper place into what's happening for you, because you have to find peace with it. It's part of your existence as a person. So the depth that it takes then to do the work to find peace with food equates to finding peace with your body, which equates to finding peace with how we define a lot of things in the world. And that can be a really beautiful thing. It can be a very powerful thing for your loved one. Finding their true, authentic self. So it's not easy, and I don't wish it upon anyone. It's not a joyous journey the whole way to walk, but it can be a purposeful experience that is life-changing and transforming of them on a path that can help them to discover who they are. So we can get to these points when we have them connected as a treatment into a support system. We can get to the stage when you all are showing up as best as you can, of loving and supporting. So there we have it. Those are the 9 truths about eating disorders. If there's any questions or comments, please feel free to type away. I'd be happy to answer any. And if not, this is just something to think about. And, you know, we will have our next chat on the second Wednesday of July at 8 p.m. And you can bring any questions there or any comments from these 9 truths that you've thought about. You can bring them to the next chat. So it's a really a good starting point. And again, the website is worldeatingdisordersday.org. So take a look there. And also, you know, if you really want to start advocating and becoming part of this community who is trying to create change, we really invite you to join our Circles of Change movement. And we're trying to create, and we are creating this revolution of people really starting to think differently about our bodies. And this is really key to start doing this. Circles of Change, you know, check out our website, Circles of Change, and join us in the conversation. So thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next month. Be well.